This is my review of the AC/DC album Ballbreaker. It was released in 1995 and produced by Rick Rubin and Mike Fraser. So this album has Phil Rudd playing drums on it again. I think it's the first album since Flick of the Switch. So it's kind of cool that he's back. I think that his playing just kind of fits in better with AC/DC than any of the other drummers. So this album was one of the ones that growing up I didn't know anybody that had it. Coming out in 1995, I would have been like 5 when this album came out. And by then my parents had kind of stopped buying albums, so I didn't really know anybody that had it. None of my friends had it either. I think I got it around like 2008 probably. I remember buying it, like I remember coming back from the store with it, but I don't remember exactly when it was that I got it. Never been one of my favorite AC/DC albums really, probably one of my least listened to. Not really sure if it's my least favorite yet because pretty much from like this album onwards, like I don't know the albums that well. I guess Step Upper Lip, the next one, I kind of know pretty well. Anyway, I think I'm not really like a huge fan of the production on this album, and it seems like the songs as a whole, it's almost like a lot of people talk about the next album, Step Upper Lip, like it's their blues album, but to me it kind of seems like they were going in like a bluesier direction on this album too, because it just, I don't know, the songs seem kind of slower and maybe just like not as heavy, is what I typically think of with AC/DC. And also I think that Brian Johnson was having like, I mean, he'd been kind of having trouble with his voice for a while, it seems like, or at least his voice had been changing. I think since around like the time of Fly on the Walls, when I seemed to notice it a little bit. I think this album is kind of where his voice is at its weakest, and then he kind of bounces back on the next album, and it sounded pretty good since then. But I feel like Brian's vocals on this album just kind of lack the power that they had before, and they're kind of a little more like hoarse than usual. Like they're like most hoarse on this album. Anyway, the first song, Hard as a Rock, I think is one of the singles for this album. Let me check, because I'm not really... Yeah, it was one of the singles for this album, so... to me, this is kind of just an okay song, especially as the opening track and one of the singles. It's not extremely, like, memorable. It had some cool guitar parts in it, but not one of my favorite songs. And I think the lyrics on this album has, like, kind of some of their worst lyrics, in my opinion, which... You know, AC/DC is not really known for their lyrics or anything. But some of the songs on this album, just like their titles and the lyrics, are just a little bit worse than some of the other albums, it seems to me. And I kind of put Hard as a Rock in that category of song a little bit. The second song, Cover You in Oil, another song with kind of a terrible title. But I like the song a little more. I think it's a little catchier. And then the third song, The Fuhrer, which I'm not sure if that's like a reference to, you know who. But the song is, I think, one of the better songs on the album as far as like musically. It sounds pretty good. It's got some cool guitar on it. I think that it would sound better like sung by like a younger Brian Johnson, or maybe like Brian Johnson on the next album, because on like around this time it seemed like his voice just like lacked the power to really pull off the kind of vocal that kind of song needed, because there were songs on the Razor's Edge that had a similar kind of atmosphere to this song, but they worked better because he sounded a little better on that album, and also the production on that album just in general I think sounded a little better. This album just sounds kind of like, I mean, I don't really know like the technical terms and stuff, but it sounds just like a little like kind of weak and thin to me. Like, I don't know. The fourth song, Boogeyman, is another song that I thought was kind of like slower, maybe like a little more bluesy. Another song where like I think the lyrics are kind of silly, and like the title Boogeyman is kind of silly, but Brian's voice works a little bit better on this song because it's just the kind of slower sounding stuff, and it's got some cool guitar parts on it, so I actually kind of like that song too. The fifth song, Honey Roll, It's got some cool guitar parts, but just doesn't really. I don't know. It's not like one of my favorite songs on the album. It's just kind of okay. The sixth song, "Burning Alive," I actually kind of think that this song is like the best song on the album. I really like the guitar parts in it. I just think it's catchy and kind of a memorable song. Something that just kind of grabs my attention. So, yeah, I'd say that song's probably my favorite song on the album. The seventh song, "Hail Caesar," another song that's pretty cool. I think that like musically, it's kind of an interesting song because they do this bit where they kind of like slow down and then they kind of like, you know, go crazy again towards the end. So it was a pretty cool song. The eighth song, "Love Bomb," was a song that's just kind of okay. It was there. Like didn't dislike it or anything. I just, it was on and I couldn't really think of anything to say about it other than it was fine. The ninth song, "Caught with Your Pants Down," it's got some cool guitar parts, but it's kind of a silly title. The 10th song, "Whiskey on the Rocks," was another kind of slower one. Had some cool guitar parts. Another song that I think is one of the songs I like a little bit more on the album. And then the 11th and final track, the title track, "Ballbreaker." It's not like horrible or anything. It's got some cool guitar, but it's not like really memorable, especially for a title track or a closing track. It's just kind of okay. So, I mean, overall, this album, I'd say it's just like, it's not bad, but it's just not very memorable. The songs aren't extremely, like, they're not amongst like AC/DC's best songs. They've got some cool guitar on some of them, but I don't really like the production of the album that much. I think it's probably the worst Brian sounds on any of the albums. Not that he doesn't really sound bad, but it's definitely sounds like he's having some trouble with his voice on this album, a little bit more so than the others. But like I said, on the next album, he sounds good again, or pretty good again. So I don't know what went on exactly there. But yeah, just definitely not one of my favorite AC/DC albums. I'd probably give it a 3 out of 5 though, because it's not a bad album. It's got some good songs on it, but it's just got a lot of kind of mediocre songs. So it's not one I listen to a whole lot, and listening to it for this review didn't really change my opinion on it a lot. It pretty much stayed about the same. So I wouldn't recommend checking this one out like first or anything. Not quite sure if it's my least favorite AC/DC album, but it's probably pretty close.